Some coronations mark the beginning of prosperous reigns. Others mark the beginning of curses so powerful they reshape kingdoms. For Theon, who'd been named heir after his father's death, and who everyone expected would become a powerful ruler, his coronation day became the day everything fell apart. The crown was placed on his head in the grand cathedral, witnessed by thousands. Then the ancient chains materialized from nowhere, wrapping around his wrists and ankles and throat with magic so old and dark that every mage in the kingdom felt it simultaneously. The curse had been cast by his father's enemies decades ago, dormant and waiting for this exact moment. When the heir took the crown, he would be bound, trapped in beast form at night, chained to the palace, unable to leave, or the chains would kill him, unable to shift freely, or the beast would consume his humanity completely. A prisoner in his own kingdom, wearing a crown he couldn't escape, and chains he couldn't break. For 20 years, Theon ruled from his beautiful cage, transforming into a wolf every sunset and becoming human again at dawn. The kingdom functioned, but he was isolated, bitter, convinced the curse was permanent. Then came Queen Lyric, the scholar maid who'd spent 5 years researching impossible curses, and who arrived at his palace claiming she could break what everyone else said was unbreakable. She looked at the chains binding their immortal king and said 4 words that would change both their lives. "I can free you." Theon had been 25 when his father died suddenly, heart failure that came without warning, leaving the kingdom without a ruler and Theon without preparation. He'd been trained for eventual succession, but expected decades more before actually taking the crown. Instead, he'd been thrust into kingship with barely a week to grieve before the coronation ceremony. The day had been beautiful, autumn sunlight streaming through cathedral windows.
Nobles and citizens packed into every available space to witness the crowning of their new king. Theon had felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders as the crown was placed on his head. Then came the magic, dark and suffocating, chains materializing from nothing, wrapping around him before anyone could react. He'd fallen to his knees under the weight, feeling power surge through the metal that bound him. The head mage had rushed forward, tried to break the chains. Nothing worked. They'd tried for hours while Theon knelt on the cathedral floor. Every mage in the kingdom attempted dispelling magic. The chains didn't even flicker. As sunset approached, Theon felt his body begin to shift. The wolf form he'd been able to control perfectly since age 20 was suddenly consuming him without consent. He'd transformed in front of the entire court, unable to stop it. Spent his first night as king, trapped in wolf form, chained and terrified. At dawn, he'd shifted back to human.
Discovered the horrifying truth. He was cursed to transform every night, unable to control it. The chains prevented him from leaving the palace grounds. Attempting to remove them magically caused agonizing pain. This was his reign now: daytime king, nighttime prisoner. The first months were adjustment. Theon learned to rule despite the chains. They were long enough to allow movement through the palace, but not beyond its walls. He conducted business during daylight hours, established routines that worked around the forced transformation. The kingdom functioned, but he was isolated. Nobles pitied him. Citizens saw him as cursed rather than powerful. Allies questioned whether a bound king could truly rule. Theon had tried everything to break the curse, consulted every mage in the kingdom and several from neighboring realms, researched ancient texts, attempted dozens of different magical approaches. Nothing worked. The curse was too old, too powerful, too perfectly constructed. After 5 years, he'd stopped actively trying. After 10 years, he'd accepted this was permanent. After 15 years, he'd forgotten what freedom felt like. After 20 years, he'd become bitter. Ruled competently but distantly. Maintained order but without joy. Existed rather than lived. Then came Lyric.
She appeared at his palace on a cold winter morning, requesting immediate audience. Said she'd been researching his curse for 5 years. Claimed she could break it. Theon had heard similar claims before. Desperate mages and ambitious charlatans who thought they could succeed where everyone else failed. He'd stopped seeing them after the first dozen disappointments. But something about this woman was different. She didn't come with grand claims or confident promises. She came with careful analysis and honest uncertainty. I've studied your curse for 5 years. I believe I understand its structure. I can't guarantee I can break it, but I'd like to try.
That honesty convinced him to listen. They met in his study, Lyric spreading documents and magical diagrams across his desk. She explained what she'd learned. The curse wasn't just dark magic. It was blood magic combined with ancient binding rituals, cast by multiple practitioners working together, designed specifically to activate at coronation and be nearly impossible to break. Nearly impossible isn't the same as impossible. She traced her finger across a diagram showing the curse's magical structure. There's a weakness, small but present. The curse requires constant power to maintain. That power is drawn from 3 anchors hidden in locations connected to your father's enemies. Find the anchors, destroy them simultaneously, and the curse should collapse. Should? Theon had learned to distrust hopeful maybes. I said I couldn't guarantee. She'd met his eyes. This is theoretical, untested, possibly wrong, but it's more than anyone else has offered.
What would attempting this cost? Time, resources, and trust. We'd need to locate the anchors. That means investigating your father's enemies and their territories. We'd need to plan coordinated strikes. That means trusting people to help. And we'd need to accept that if I'm wrong, nothing changes, except you've spent months hoping for nothing. Theon had considered. 20 years of being chained. 20 years of forced transformations and isolation. 20 years of ruling from a beautiful cage. What did he have to lose? All right, let's try. The next 6 months were intensive research and investigation. Lyric moved into the palace, set up a workspace in a tower room, and threw herself into studying everything about Theon's father's reign and enemies. She interviewed old advisors, examined historical records, traced political conflicts back decades. Theon provided access to everything she requested. Also found himself spending time with her beyond what was strictly necessary for the curse work. She was fascinating, brilliant, and obsessive about her research, but also funny in understated ways, would make dry observations about historical figures that made him laugh despite himself. They started having dinner together while she explained her findings. She'd get animated discussing magical theory, gesturing enthusiastically while Theon listened. He started looking forward to these conversations, started counting hours until sunset differently, not dreading the transformation, but anticipating the time with Lyric before it happened. 4 months into her research, she found the first anchor, hidden in the ruins of an estate that had belonged to one of his father's political enemies, a magical artifact pulsing with dark power, clearly feeding energy into the curse network. They couldn't destroy it yet, needed all 3 for simultaneous destruction.
But knowing one location gave them hope. The second anchor took another 2 months to locate, buried beneath an abandoned fortress on the kingdom's border. The third anchor was the hardest, required Lyric to piece together fragments of information from dozens of sources, finally traced it to a location that made Theon's stomach drop: his father's tomb. The final anchor had been hidden in the one place Theon couldn't go. Attempting to leave the palace grounds would trigger the chains to kill him. He couldn't personally verify the location or participate in destroying it, would have to trust others completely. 8 months after Lyric arrived, they had a plan. 3 teams, each would go to an anchor location. At precisely the same moment, they'd destroy the artifacts. If Lyric's theory was correct, the curse would collapse without its power source. If she was wrong, nothing would change, and they'd be back to accepting this was permanent. The night before the attempt, Theon couldn't sleep. Spent hours in his study reviewing the plan,
trying to prepare himself for both success and failure. Lyric found him past midnight, brought tea, sat with him in comfortable silence. "What if this doesn't work?" he'd finally asked. "Then we keep trying, or we accept the limitations and figure out how to live well despite them. But Theon, hope is better than resignation. Even if we fail, trying matters." He looked at this woman who'd spent 8 months fighting for his freedom. "Why do you care so much? You barely know me. Why invest so much time and effort into breaking a curse that doesn't affect you?" "Because nobody should live in chains," she'd said it simply. "Because your father's enemies don't get to punish you for his actions. Because you deserve freedom. Everyone does. That's reason enough." The attempt happened at noon the next day. 3 teams deployed to their respective locations. Theon waited in the palace courtyard, Lyric beside him. Both of them watching the sun track across the sky. The timing had to be perfect. All 3 anchors destroyed within seconds of each other, or the curse would remain intact. Noon approached. Theon felt the chains heavy on his wrists, constant reminder of 20 years imprisoned. Felt fear that this wouldn't work, that he'd spent 8 months hoping for nothing, that Lyric would leave and he'd be alone again. Then noon struck. He felt it immediately. The chains flared with magic, burning against his skin. Pain so intense he fell to his knees. Lyric was beside him, her hands glowing with magic as she worked to stabilize the curse structure while it collapsed. The chains started cracking, pieces falling away, magic dissipating. The pain was overwhelming. Then suddenly, it stopped. The chains shattered completely, falling to the ground as inert metal. Theon touched his wrists, feeling skin that hadn't been free in 20 years. Stood slowly, testing his balance without the weight. Lyric was watching him with hope and fear. "Try to shift. See if you can control it." He reached for his wolf form. The shift came smoothly, controlled, exactly as it had before the curse. He transformed and back again within seconds. The forced transformations were gone. He had control again. Then he did something he'd been unable to do for 20 years. He walked toward the palace gates. Lyric followed, both of them holding their breath. He crossed the boundary, stepped beyond the palace grounds for the first time in 2 decades. Nothing stopped him. No pain, no chains. He was free. Theon turned to Lyric, who was crying with relief and joy. "You did it! You actually did it!" "We did it," she corrected. "You trusted me enough to try. That mattered as much as the magic." He'd pulled her into an embrace, both of them laughing and crying simultaneously. 20 years of chains, 8 months of work, 1 perfect moment of freedom. The weeks after breaking the curse were a strange adjustment. Theon could go anywhere, could shift at will, could experience sunset as human if he chose. The freedom was overwhelming and wonderful. He tested it constantly, walked through the city, visited border territories, did everything he'd been unable to do for 20 years. But the most important change was internal. The bitterness that had accumulated over 2 decades of imprisonment started dissolving. He became engaged with his kingdom in new ways, more present, more joyful, more himself. Lyric stayed, said she wanted to document the curse breaking for academic purposes. Both of them knew that was excuse. She stayed because something had developed between them during 8 months of working together. Theon asked her to dinner properly, not working meal, but actual date. She said yes. They spent the evening talking about everything except curses and chains. Discovered they had more in common than just magical research. Both loved books, both had complicated relationships with duty. Both understood what it meant to be isolated by circumstances. "I should tell you something," Lyric had said toward the end of dinner. "What?" "I didn't come here just because of academic interest in your curse. I came because I lost someone to a curse I couldn't break. My brother. He died trapped by dark magic I couldn't counter. When I heard about you, about this supposedly unbreakable curse, I needed to try, needed to prove I could save someone even if I couldn't save him. I'm sorry you lost your brother. Theon had taken her hand. "But thank you for saving me, for not giving up even when it seemed impossible. Your brother would be proud of what you accomplished." She'd smiled through tears. "I think he would be." They'd continued dating after that, slowly, carefully, both of them dealing with their respective damage. Theon adjusting to freedom, Lyric processing her grief. Together they were building something genuine. 6 months after the curse broke, Theon proposed.
Not grand ceremony, but private moment in the tower room where Lyric had done her research. Asked if she'd considered staying permanently, as his partner and queen. Not because he needed someone to break curses, but because he loved her. Because she'd given him freedom, but more importantly, had given her connection. She'd said yes. They married quietly. Simple ceremony focused on commitment rather than politics. Lyric became queen, continued her magical research, established programs to help others trapped by curses. 5 years after breaking the curse, during a quiet evening in quarters they now shared, Theon asked her something that had been on his mind. "Do you regret it? Giving up your traveling research to stay here?" "Never." She'd curled against him. "I found what I was looking for. Purpose, partnership, home. Breaking your curse gave me all of that. I still think about those 20 years sometimes. The isolation, the bitterness, how close I came to giving up completely."
"Then don't think about it alone." She'd kissed him. "Think about it with me. Let me remind you that you survived, that you're free now, that those 20 years don't define you anymore." They'd sat in comfortable quiet, the former cursed king and the maid who'd freed him, living proof that some chains can be broken, that hope matters even when success seems impossible, that the right person will fight for your freedom and then stay to build a life with you afterward. If this story reminded you that seemingly impossible obstacles can be overcome with persistence and the right help, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Drop a comment with the word moon if you believe everyone deserves freedom from whatever chains them. Share this video with someone who needs to know that curses can be broken and hope is worth maintaining even when success seems distant. Sometimes the person who frees you becomes the person you build your life with. Thanks for watching, and remember,
We all have chains of some kind, and the bravest thing we can do is accept help breaking them.